They don't, Maggie, have to be entirely about pensions. The fear I have is that every time some new kind of product or structure is brought in, it's a sort of a thin end of a wedge to diverting money which needs to be put aside for your retirement income. I mean, we've heard recently about the possibility that people will be able to take money out of their pots for sort of lifestyle events, maybe buying a house or children's education or whatever it is, which they've put aside originally for their pension. I see that as a big mistake. I don't think we can allow money to be diverted in this way. I think people will regret it in the long term.
I slightly disagree with that, actually, on the basis, I mean, notwithstanding auto-enrolment coming in, because there are so many companies where we go and talk to the staff where there is pension available. I think it was you, Andy, said about free money, someone said earlier, I think, but where there's a DC scheme available, there's matching available, and people just do not join the pension scheme. So my sort of counter argument to that is, for a lot of people, it's not, they're not now saving into an ISA rather than the pension. They never saved into the pension.
That's an argument for compulsion.
Well, that's what I say. Notwithstanding also, but to say that people save into an alternative savings vehicle is at the expense of pension, I think in a lot of, I think the stats, I think Mercer have done stats on this. I think probably about 50%, isn't it, of DC schemes, something like that. So half, give or take. It is not about that they're diverting money from pension to other savings vehicles. It's just they're not saving.
Well, I think actually, if you're bringing into other type of savings, several years back, I was able to save into share plans and profit share plans, and actually they seem more excitable. And I put good money into those because I was being told, well, the shares did well and all that kind of stuff, and you knew, actually, on occasions I did very well. Equally, as the market changed, there are many schemes out there where they're underwater, and people sat on shares which are pretty worthless.
I think there is,
and then there's a kind of regret that they didn't put money elsewhere, which could be things like ISAs, it could be things like the pension plan.
I think that relates to your point on workplace savings. I mean, people don't use the allowances they've got. I mean, I've come across some very sophisticated employee benefits packages where they have got a pension, they have an ISA, they have save as you earn schemes, they have all sorts of different bells and whistles. But if the members aren't engaged or inclined to join them and take advantage of them, they will turn down free money. And regardless of tax incentive, the 40% relief, the tax-free status of save as you earn, the advantage to be able to do any of those things.
A bonus at the end of the period.
Exactly. If people don't understand and engage with it, the trouble we have in society, I think, in the UK, is that people are far too happy to have everything now, and the debt point that you make. And the question is perhaps, how do we turn that culture around to savings and the responsibility and accountability for creating wealth for your long-term future versus building up that credit profile and not being as responsible perhaps as one should.
This is going back to the delayed and instant gratification question. I think what will help to turn it around is when the next generation of pensioners come to retirement and realise they can't retire. That's going to shift things significantly. It's probably not the best marketing strategy, but that's what's going to shift things significantly. Whatever we do in the meantime, we're shouting into an empty room. People don't necessarily want to listen because they want the latest iPhone, they want the latest iPad. It is going to be a difficult job to do to convince people that they should be saving. Go back to the question. I mean, I think it has to be a balance between the two. Like Simon, I'm incredibly nervous that if you say, well, here's a savings pot and you can dip into it, people will dip into it, and then they won't have enough money come to retirement. But on the other hand, I think you do need some other feeder type of savings arrangement just to encourage the savings mentality.
Do you not think, though, that the people, when you go out and say to people, what do you aspire to buy? Most people will aspire to say, well, I want to go and buy a flat or a house or whatever. So I actually think there's a real logic of getting people to save into some sort of pensions vehicle which has the added attraction for them that actually they can take money out to do one of those things that actually they do aspire to do. And I kind of look at that as a real positive as to how you can get people saving and they get that pension running. They're not going to be taking 100% of it out. So surely that's kind of better than the 50% of people that do nothing.
It's almost modelled on the old SAS system. We have a loan bank.
Yeah,
You know,
but look,
you've got money
and I
in,
was,
no
and
money
I was going
back.
to say, Martin, you and I have both been in this
Yeah.
industry long enough to remember those loan backs,
That's right.
and how complicated were they to administer? How often did the loan not get repaid, and there was defaulters on the loan,
Yeah.
which means a reduced level of savings in the pot, which means a lower level of retirement income that is available. So rather than making it available from the pot, why not make it available from appropriate savings plans that complement the pensions pot? So the pension remains the long-term vehicle,
Yeah.
which people can't get their money on, which will form the bedrock of their retirement. Anything they want to do in addition to that goes into another type of pension vehicle.
With the
It does
surplus being transferred across.
Absolutely.
That's similar to pension mortgages as well. I mean, people
Yeah.
funding their pension with the objective of using their tax-free cash pot at the end to settle their mortgage debt.
But there's no getting away from the thing. What we've got to do is completely re-educate the consumer, because they want more and more and more, but they're putting less and less and less aside. What we've got to do is encourage them to put more and more aside.
And this is where I'm morally torn on auto-enrolment for graduates coming into the workplace with 20 grand in debt. On the one hand, it's really good to force them into a culture of saving, i.e. that you're making them do it. On the other hand, would that money be better off diverted to help them repay their debt quicker? And the problem is, it's only better to help them repay their debt quicker as long as they don't go into debt elsewhere by buying houses, paying for weddings, or buying iPads. And that's the challenge, is that you can even take a horse to water, help them to do all the right things to accumulate wealth quicker. If you don't actually fundamentally change their behaviours, they're still just going to go and borrow anyway.
But I suppose that's a debate though, because people will want to go and do those things. They will want to go and get married. They will want to go and buy a house. So I mean, realistically, that's what people aspire to. So it almost sort of suggests that if you could have a savings vehicle which had that sort of short, medium and long term in, but it was seen as one vehicle. So for for every £1 you put in, a third could be available in a short period of time, 5 years, 10 years. A third could be available in sort of medium term, and a third is what your pension. And maybe when you get to certain ages, you can up the amount that goes into your. Maybe that's something that the industry needs. So you get that kind of savings, but people actually understand there is a bit of instant gratification, because actually a third of it.
I think it's got problems with the kind of investment vehicles that we use for pensions as well. We're looking at all of the growth phase of that accumulation phase. It is based around a long-term savings vehicle. So if you're saying that you can have access to this in 5 years, or a third of it in 5 years, whatever it might be, what happens to the market timing of that? The fund that you're in is designed for a long period of time, and it has a lifestyle that will phase you out of that growth piece at the point that when you get close to retirement. If you allow people just to take money when they want the money, that doesn't encourage them to think about the time at which they take the money. So if they start taking the money when the market is depressed, the value of the money they're taking out could actually be less than what the value of the money is.
I suppose. I wasn't really looking at it like that. So I wasn't saying that you just go into funds. So in the workplace, if they're a quoted company, the short-term vehicle that third goes in might be your SAYE scheme.
Absolutely, and that's my point. A pension is for long term.
So what I was really trying to say is that you kind of wrap it somehow.
Fine.
But it's that
And I agree with that.
do you entice people in?
And I agree.